Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Secretary Hillary Clinton, the 67th United States Secretary of State, it's a great pleasure welcoming you here. You have crossed time zones, continents to be with us. So welcome to Riyadh, the vibrant capital, and welcome to the RFF, the Real Estate Future Forum.
Thank you so much, and I am truly delighted to be back in Riyadh, to be at this forum, to have this opportunity to discuss issues together. And I have to, before we start, recognize our longtime, very valued friend, Prince Turki. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
It's a great pleasure having him with us.
It means a great deal to me personally, and I can't wait to call Bill and tell him that I got to see you. Thank you.
Well, as you arrived here in Riyadh, what feeling did it give you? Like, something felt most changed or most alive for you from your last visit?
I haven't been here since I was Secretary of State. My last visit was, I believe, in 2012. But I have followed developments very closely. I had the opportunity of meeting His Royal Highness about 6 or 7 years ago during his first trip to the United States. And I thought I was prepared to see the changes, what Vision 2030 and the extraordinary hard work of the people of the kingdom has wrought, but even I was surprised, Wema. I have been talking to people. Last night had a dinner with a number of women who are in the forefront of the professional, academic, governmental changes that are going on. I was surprised by the traffic. I don't remember that from my last time here in Riyadh. But overall, it is exhilarating to see the development, but not just the physical development, the human capital development, the changes that are happening within society as reflected all around us by the ambition and the energy that is so apparent to anyone.
Absolutely. That human energy you just described is the real sign for real transformation.
Yes.
And let me ask you, when you look at the world today, you know, cities are rising, societies are reshaping themselves. What feels fundamentally different about this era of change?
Well, I think it is fair to say that the world is undergoing transformational change. I'm not sure, not at all, how it will come out. Countries are realigning in their cooperation or antagonism toward others. There are huge changes below the political surface, demographic. Many countries are losing population, others are continuing to grow at a rapid rate. The effects of climate change, despite some efforts to deny them, is very apparent and has to be recognized and dealt with because they will have impacts on how we live and prosper together. So the level of change is as dramatic as we have seen in probably 75 to 80 years. Certainly, the post-World War II era is under tremendous strain. The institutions that were built are not fit for purpose and have to be reformed if they are to be adequate to the challenges ahead. So on the one hand, it is somewhat troubling because living through such uncertainty always raises many questions as to where we will end up. But on the other hand, it is exciting. And if countries have a vision, if countries are focused on developing their people and understanding that's where the real strength and wealth lies, If countries are more interested in cooperation than conflict, and if countries are willing to participate in remaking institutions, then I think within 5 to 10 years, this very difficult, uncertain, unpredictable period we are going through will come out with a better outcome than perhaps we see now. Obviously, if that doesn't happen, then I think it's unfortunately going to be a much more competitive, contested, and perhaps conflict-ridden world, which is not good for anybody.
Absolutely. Well, you have lived through many waves of change. Let me bring the lens more closer to you. So from First Lady to Senator to Secretary of State and now Chancellor and Professor, how did those pivotal transformation change the way you understand leadership?
That's a really good question. And just taking the sort of points, the milestones that you mentioned, I will say this, and I will sound very biased, but I will do it anyway. My husband's presidency was one of great optimism and accomplishment. It was one of bringing people together, of finding common ground. It was one of great economic prosperity where there wasn't the huge divide that we see now in the United States and elsewhere, where people at the lowest rung of the economy saw greater gains than people at the top. Everyone went up, but on a basis of where they started from, people at the bottom had a larger percentage increase. So at the end of those 8 years, there was a sense of optimism, there was a sense of possibility. So the kind of leadership I saw was not separate from what I viewed as the successes of those 8 years. Now, did we get everything right? Did we get everything done we were trying to do? Obviously not. I was attempting, at my husband's request, to try to get us to a more sensible, affordable, universal health care system. That didn't succeed then, but it began to work years later under the Obama administration. But overall, the kind of leadership style that I saw was very positive, energetic, dynamic, and inclusive, and I thought it worked very well. When I became a United States Senator in 2001, that was under the presidency of President George W. Bush, and I saw a different kind of leadership, and I thought that there were both positives and negatives to that form of leadership. I was particularly concerned by the economic policies because they did not build on the successes of the Clinton administration, and they unfortunately led to some serious financial disruption in 2007, 2008, as we all remember. But I also saw President Bush practice what he called compassionate conservatism. And I want to underscore that, because even though he and I did not agree on a lot of the political issues of the time, he did two things that were significant, one to me personally and the people I represented, and one more generally for the world. When we were attacked on 9/11, and I was a senator from New York, it became my overwhelming responsibility to help rebuild New York. And when I met with President Bush 2 days after the attack, he looked at me in the Oval Office and he said to me, "What do you need?" And I said, "President Bush, we need $20 billion for New York. We have to rebuild downtown. We have to take care of the people who lost loved ones. We have to work to help those who responded to the disaster." And he looked at me and he said, "You've got it." And he never wavered. His word was good. I could count on it. And he never let any other political influence deviate from that. The second thing was his policy on dealing with HIV/AIDS in Africa, which came out of the compassionate conservatism. He created the president's program called PEPFAR, and the United States has spent many, many billions of dollars keeping people alive, keeping people from getting that terrible disease. There was no direct benefit for the United States or for George W. Bush politically. He did it because he thought it was the right thing to do, and he worked with my husband to get the cost of the drugs down so more people could be served. So that kind of leadership said to me, look, you can be more, quote, conservative in some of your views, and I can disagree with that, but if you have a heart, if you have a mind to match that heart, to care about people, that's a good kind of leadership. And then when President-elect Obama asked me to be Secretary of State, and I initially said no because I wanted to stay in the Senate, eventually said yes, I saw a very cerebral, very carefully thought through kind of leadership. I've talked about this before, I've written about it, but being one of the very few people, and obviously the only woman in the room, the Situation Room, where we discussed with President Obama whether the intelligence was credible enough to be actionable to go after bin Laden, I saw a presidential decision-making process that I was very impressed by and proud of. It was not at all asking that people tell him what they thought he wanted to hear. It was very, very much rooted in evidence and facts, and he ended up making a risky decision that worked out. I took that away from that experience. And so I feel very, very fortunate to have seen 3 presidents in a very close and obviously personal way, in the first one with my husband, but also to work with and see President Bush, to work closely and see President Obama. And I think that it is important, and now you say, I'm teaching at Columbia University, I'm teaching a course called Inside the Situation Room, and it is a course about how you make tough decisions when you don't have all the information, when you are being pushed and pulled by different points of view. How do you see clearly enough to make the best decision? So now I'm teaching a class, co-teaching of about 400 students, graduate and undergraduate from all over the world, trying to convey those lessons that I learned very luckily over the last 35 years.
Well, as they say, behind all those titles, there's always a story that never makes it into a biography. Is there a personal experience for you, unseen, unrecorded, that deeply shaped you more than any role ever did?
Oh, so many. I will just quickly mention a few, Wema, because they go back even into my youth, my childhood. I was very fortunate when I was, I think, 14 years old, to hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak. I lived in a suburb of Chicago. I went to an all-white school, a large one, about 4,000 students. I had a very kind of typical upbringing. My father was a World War II Navy veteran. But my world was pretty contained. I didn't have a lot of experience outside of it. But I was fortunate enough through my church to have a young man who was our youth minister, who basically said, we want you to learn more about the world. It's easy to be a person of faith if you never encounter anybody different from yourself. It's easy to just get up and live your life if it's very predictable and nothing changes. So he made it possible for us to go and be part of many different experiences, but the most consequential was hearing Dr. King speak. And he gave a speech called Staying Awake Through a Revolution. And it was metaphorical. It wasn't talking about a real revolution. It was talking about the revolution of ideas, thinking differently, changing how you see yourself and other people. That was so impactful to me because I had heard about this man. I didn't pay much attention. I was a teenager. But sitting there and listening to him had such a really broadening effect on me and caused me to think differently about what was going on in the world, what was going on with different people. And I've carried that with me because now we live in a world, whether one likes it or not, that is very globalized. And with the internet, our children are being exposed to all kinds of things, much of which we weren't prepared for and wish they had not been. So how do you prepare young people to have their values, to be rooted, to have that kind of sense of belonging, but also to be open to the world and to hear different ideas from people unlike yourself? So when I think about a personal experience, that has lived with me. It's as vibrant today as it was all those many years ago.
And definitely a life-changing experience.
Yes.
Well, Secretary Clinton, there is a time many leaders actually reach when experience no longer fits the role and the role itself actually has to change. So at what point did you realize that you were no longer expected to adapt to a role but actually redefine it?
It's a really interesting question. I suppose after the 2016 presidential election, obviously, losing that election was personally very disappointing in every way, but also worrying about what was going to come next was a big preoccupation of mine. So moving from actually being in a position where you can make decisions, where you are working on solving problems in a very concrete way, to looking for opportunities to be helpful, to be supportive, to try to influence the direction that leaders and others are taking, has been, what I've done now for the last, I guess 7-8 years. And I would say this, in a way, each individual has the potential of being much more influential now because of the internet. Anyone can go online, anyone can do a video, anyone can express their opinions, and we see a lot that is irresponsible, which is untrue, which is wrong. But we also see a lot that is trying to convey a point of view, trying to influence how people see the world, how they make decisions in their own lives or their professions, or even in governments. So the opportunity to be influential now is great. And the responsibility, therefore, should be also great. Not to be quick to judge, not to be looking for likes or clicks, but to try to be, more effective in what you say and how you say it. And so I think that both from my teaching, from my writing, the work I do at the Clinton Foundation, trying to help people come together to solve problems, face some of the difficulties we have, particularly right now in the United States, with everything from, rejecting vaccines to dealing with the impact of social media on children. These are very big, important issues, and so I am deeply involved in them, speaking out, writing, being online, looking for colleagues, partners, allies to deal with these issues. So it's a different role, but it's one that I take equally seriously.
Well, I'm curious actually to ask you where you stand now today. Do you feel more responsibility or more freedom?
It's an interesting combination. Of course, I feel more freedom in the sense that I'm not showing up at a job every day. I'm not held responsible in voting in the Senate or testifying before them as Secretary of State or coming to an official meeting here in Riyadh or anywhere in the world. So there's that sense of freedom, but I don't feel any less responsibility. I'll give you a quick example. So
Sure.
I think the evidence is overwhelming that keeping children off of social media until they're 15 or 16 is better for their mental health, better for their attention in school. I have 3 grandchildren. The oldest is 11. I have an 11-year-old granddaughter, and then I have a 9-year-old grandson and a 6-year-old grandson. And so I feel as much of a responsibility as I have ever felt for trying to make sure that their lives are as good as they can be, and that they are responsible, of course, for the path they take on life, but that they're not being influenced adversely, that they are not finding, the world less safe, less prosperous, less open than it was when they were born. So in looking at the impact of social media, I am convinced that we have to protect our children from this. We are conducting a huge experiment on their brains, on their hearts, on their souls, by subjecting them to things that they would never have seen in any other era of human history. We have to be much more watchful. So through the Clinton Foundation, I'm working with partners to get phones out of school. They never should have been there in the first place. I really approve of what Australia and now France have done, trying to prevent children under 15 or 16 from having their own social media accounts, providing much more parental supervision and educating parents so that they know the dangers. If you look at the statistics, you can mark from 2010, when social media exploded and smartphones were so universally available, how children have greater rates of depression, anxiety, all kinds of problems that I don't think are fair to inflict on children. So I carry that sense of responsibility because I have a voice, I have a big online following, I have the ability to convene people through the Clinton Foundation. So it's a combination. Freedom, I don't show up in an office. Responsibility, because I care what happens in the world, particularly to young people.
Amazing. So let's talk about where responsibility will take us next. As you mentioned, through the Clinton Foundation, the Climate Initiative, I'm going to add to what you just shared with us. You have worked on retrofitting cities, health systems, public spaces. So what does that work reveal about how cities actually adapt or fail when change outpaces their ability to respond?
That's another great question.
Thank you.
I think that what we are seeing right now are the very negative effects of extreme heat on people who have to work outside. And so I am focused on working with groups in the Global South to help them get access to the capital they need to better protect themselves so they can keep working. I'll give you a quick example. One of my longtime partners is a women's organization in India. It's called the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA. I've worked with them ever since I was First Lady, so a long time now, 33 years. And they have had to adapt. They have 3.5 million members, and these women are largely workers in the informal as well as the formal economy. They are construction workers, they're trash pickers, they are out in the fields, they're agricultural workers. They have worked hard their entire lives to make, a very modest living for themselves and their families. The heat is now so intense during a number of months, starting in March, that it is proving difficult, if not impossible, to work those hours. So 2 years ago, I went to the Rajasthan desert. I went to the salt pans to meet with women who were 8th and 9th generation salt workers. What does that mean? Well, after the monsoons, the water bubbles up, and it is often helped by pumps, and now they're thankfully using solar pumps, not diesel pumps. The water comes up, it sits on top of the earth in the desert, and the women rake it to get the salt out. India is like the 3rd biggest salt producer in the world. They rake this salt, they collect the salt, they dry it, they sell it. That's how they make their living. They work from October to April. Well, they used to work from sunup to sundown. They can't work afternoon in many days because the heat is 128 degrees Fahrenheit. So they have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, they start working then and often have to quit by noon. So what we are trying to do is find better ways for them to adapt. We also are pioneering an insurance product. For a few rupees a year, you have a big pool of people so that when the temperature gets above, let's say 120 degrees, they don't work in the sun, but they can get a small compensation, an insurance payment, because they have to pay for their children to go to school, they have to pay for food, they have to pay for the necessities of life. So I'm trying to figure out ways to deal with the reality. You know, a lot of people spend an enormous amount of money on renewable energy, clean energy, looking for ways to mitigate. And I think we need to be doing even more of that, and we need to be finding clever, smart ways to mitigate. But the reality is people are living with this kind of extreme heat right now. So how do we adapt to it better? So we are looking at retrofitting. We're looking at new products that can help women particularly, which is my focus, deal with this. And very little money goes to adaptation. And an even smaller percentage of the little money that goes to women-driven businesses, women-driven projects. So that's my commitment, and I'll be going back to India next month to meet with these women because I want to hear directly from them. What will help them continue? For example, one woman last time I was there, a construction worker, she said, I need tools that I can hold that don't burn my hands. Think about how obvious that is, but it's something I hadn't thought about. Can they be made of material that will still do the job, but they won't burn my hands when it is so hot? So we have to start listening, and with the building going on here in Riyadh and across the kingdom, what are your workers needing? How do they stay working in the heat of the summer and other times? So we just have to pay attention. We have to listen to the people who are actually on the front lines of doing the work, and we have to be smart and make the investments necessary to deal with that.
Amazing. So let's go back to cities. Some of them are tested by growth and some are tested by loss, and you have witnessed both. After September 11, you were part of rebuilding a city, New York City, that had been psychologically shaken, physically damaged, and globally watched. Now, how did that experience shape your understanding how cities recover their sense of purpose, not just, their skyline, and what leaders must get right when rebuilding after trauma and shock?
Well, we have a lot of lessons that we need to pay attention to. Obviously, Gaza has got to be rebuilt, but it needs to be rebuilt so that it serves the interests of the Palestinian people, not people from the outside.
Absolutely.
It needs to be built so that people can make a living there, that if they wish to stay there, they know that they will have a future. The lessons to be learned go back to post-World War II. One of the most important policies that the United States ever had, in my opinion, was something called the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan was named for a very famous American general, but it was championed by President Truman, Secretary of State Dean Acheson. And here's what it did. It didn't try to impose some kind of rebuilding on Germany and Japan and other parts of Europe that had been destroyed during World War II. It set up a mechanism so that people would have the capital to build what they needed themselves. So the money would go to businesses to rebuild their factories. The money would go to real estate developers to rebuild housing, so that it was a market-driven but governmentally funded effort. Fast forward, I think you can see that when the public and the private sector partner to build after trauma, whether it is natural disaster or conflict, you get a better result. And that's what I'm hoping we can see learned in a lot of the areas that are suffering currently. Ukraine is being decimated by the nightly barrages coming from Russia, aimed at their energy sector, aimed at civilian targets to terrify people. They are going to need an enormous amount of help, but it needs to be a public-private partnership, not imposed from the outside, not, a government saying this is where you'll build and this is what you'll build, but to go back to the question you asked very early on, Wema, to combine the freedom to build, to dream, to have a vision, with the responsibility to do it in an effective way seems to me to be the right path forward. So as I look around the world, I've seen failures. I was deeply involved in trying to rebuild Haiti, as was my husband, after the horrific earthquake that killed 280,000 people. But the private sector was never fully engaged, and so the public sector was too weak to actually be a good partner, and we are now living still with the terrible consequences of collapsed government and absent private sector leadership. So there are lessons to be learned about what to do and what not to do.
Great. I want to bring us to something very specific about Saudi Arabia that I would build up upon what you just shared with us. It's one of the world's most biggest transformation, if not the biggest, happening here. So when you look at the transformation underway here in Saudi Arabia, what feels more significant beyond the speed and scale for you?
Look, I think the determination, the vision that was then married to organization and follow through. I mean, visions come and go. You have to have a vision that is rooted in reality and that then brings all of the various players to the table who then take on a share of the responsibility for actually moving, building toward that vision. I think that's what's happening here, and I can see the results. But I also think, look, as someone who believes deeply that half the population, namely women, have a lot to contribute to any society and
under
can make a difference.
35, they're under the age of 35, so
Yeah.
it's a vibrant society for sure.
Exactly, and I think that there's so much that is happening that is right here about how to move into a future with confidence and with a clear plan for how to achieve it, but unleashing the human imagination and the human capacity to contribute is what really will be transformational, because it is sending a message that the entire society is in this together. Everyone, man, woman, and child, we are all committed to a dynamic, vibrant future for Saudi Arabia. That's the message that comes across. It's not the building of a building or the building of a new city. It's the idea that that represents a commitment to the flourishing of the entire population. And I think that's what's so exciting about the transformation. And people can build buildings, people can build new cities, but they don't have a character. They don't have an energy
Identity.
to them. This is happening here, and that's what I hope will continue to be the real hallmark of the transformation of this country.
No doubt. Well, what we just heard from you is a testimony that what is happening in this country, it's not a national story, it's actually a global one. And when a nation reimagines itself, it eventually reshapes its relationship with the world. So in this new era, how does the strong Saudi-US partnership make possible today that wasn't possible before?
Well, I think that the U.S.-Saudi partnership is critical to both countries, but even beyond our two nations to the world. I was just reading recently, knowing I was coming back, about the very beginnings of the partnership, going back to Franklin Roosevelt and the kinds of discussions that were held there and all the way through until the present time. I would just make two quick points. One, this partnership is mutually beneficial to each country. And therefore, it must stay firm through good times and bad. Because it is a cornerstone relationship. Secondly, the example that the kingdom is setting for the right kind of development, ambitious, audacious, but organized, focused, bringing people, men and women together to move into the future. That is a very strong model for other parts of the world. You know, as Secretary of State, I would travel around the world. I would meet with kings, presidents, prime ministers, leaders of all kinds. They all had wonderful rhetoric about what they wanted to do for their country, but they often were unable to translate the rhetoric into reality. They didn't know how to get from a somewhat formulated vision to a plan, to a strategy. I think that what you're doing here can send a message to other countries in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, that there is a way of developing that is more likely to work. And perhaps some of the lessons learned here can be exported. So the United States has a great interest in helping other countries develop and helping them move out of poverty and helping them provide good public services to their people. And I think that the model here, obviously taking into account the difference in resources and the like, could be very helpful to other countries. So this is a partnership that is not just between the two of us, but it's a partnership that I think has very important lessons for the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. I just love the way you have put it. And the time is now and the place is Saudi Arabia. We have spoken about cities, institutions, societies. Let me end actually where it all began, the human story. When people look back on your life, not through politics, but actually through human stories and experiences, what part of your journey do you hope that truly lasts?
Well, I'm probably the last person to ask about what my legacy might mean in the future, but I really hope that particularly as a woman, having lived through the last half of the 20th century, now the first quarter of the 21st century, that people will realize that it's always the right thing to do to stand up for those who may not have the opportunities you have, may not have the resources. I was blessed. I was blessed by a strong family. I was blessed by good health. I was blessed by a good education. But I have always tried to use my blessings on behalf of others who maybe were not so fortunate. And that's given me an enormous amount of satisfaction and joy. Because when I go to the Rajasthan desert and I see these women working so hard, and I think maybe there's some small way I can help them help themselves, that is an important goal for me. So if that can serve as some kind of template for others, I would be very happy to feel like the work that I've done and the positions I've held and the stands I've taken have some lasting impact.
I will close with a quote mentioned in your book, What Happened. I hope people say I kept going and I helped others to do the same.
That's right.
Absolutely. Secretary Clinton, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your journey so openly and for bringing such depth and clarity to this conversation. I had the pleasure to have a sit down with President Clinton last year, and here you are this year. It is my pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, please a big round of applause to Secretary Clinton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.